video evidence probation officer overtly perjured himself to send me back to jail. And my probation officer in California actually put out some inaccurate reports that I was just so fortunate enough to have video evidence that clarified a little more precisely what I think he was trying to communicate. But the result is now I'm wearing an ankle bracelet of government jewelry. Maybe I'll go back and forth like for the next 2 hours and really, really confuse the GPS monitor and make a nice little pattern for them to follow on the map. But it's funny because the only restriction I have is that I'm not allowed in DC. So we've had a lot of fun on this tour, and in an interview recently, someone asked me, "Who's the coolest famous person you've met?" And for those of you who don't know my story, going back after I got out of the Marines and was active with IVAW, I had a radio show for a while and then a TV show briefly, and I've been doing independent media online for a few years. So I've gotten to meet a lot of really amazing people. But the problem with that question is that most people in America who are famous for kind of bullshit reasons. And I don't even want to answer that question because to me, well, probably the most famous person I've met, and I won't even say his name, he said that the coolest thing about being famous was getting to hang out with other famous people. And he lives in LA, so I know that's really not saying much. But I get to hang out with people who are a part of this movement. People who are waking up, people who care about freedom, people like all of you, and I find that way more satisfying than the kind of people that I get to interview, or that hey, I don't care if you have a reason for me to interview you or not. If you're someone who's like really engaged and cares about what's going on, we're gonna have a way better time than if you just happen to be famous for no good reason. So one of the coolest things that we've gotten to do traveling around the country is ask all of the different communities that we come into contact with, and that's really what we have everywhere we go around the message of freedom. And what I've been asking is, how do people live differently as a result of an awareness of the message of freedom? So if you know all the answers, Macy, don't yell them out, but what do you see here, maybe in Virginia or in the community here in the Richmond area? What do people do differently as a result of this awareness?
Wave a lot of Confederate flags, man.
Get arrested a lot.
Get arrested a lot, well.
Illegally.
Yeah.
I know it's really unfortunate that Nathan Cox couldn't be here tonight. For those of you who don't know, Nathan Cox is an infamous local activist. He certainly should, and he gets arrested probably more than his fair share.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's really, let me contextualize this a little bit. How many of you know, like viscerally, just from having been around long enough and seeing how people wake up, that we are on the right side of history? Yeah? Pretty cool feeling, right? Because people don't, you know what I mean by like how people wake up? Nobody goes, yeah, freedom, liberty, respecting individual rights, and not pointing guns at each other to control people and organize society. What an amazing idea. And then just wakes up the next morning, screw it, let's just point guns at people I don't like. You know what I mean? It's a one-way street of awareness. And as much as we see an intellectual or philosophical convergence, there's a much deeper trend, isn't there? It's like a cultural shift, a human actualization movement that is happening along with this. And it's manifest particularly strongly, unsurprisingly, in the culture of people who see that a voluntary society is not just inevitable, but something that we should be working towards actively. So, daily lives. I hope that getting arrested is not something you have to deal with on a daily basis here as libertarians in Richmond. Statism isn't that thick here, is it? Okay.
It's a police state here, mate. Yes. Unfortunately, yes.
Well, actually, no, it was really good to hear that marijuana was just legalized in Virginia. You're just not allowed.
What?
You're just not allowed to carry more than you can put in your mouth at one time. Okay, so what do you see people doing differently in their daily lives? Question authority, absolutely. So it's not getting arrested, I would hope, but when you have encounters with police, as one example of authority, you engage differently when it's messages from government in some form or for any other authority in your life. Just the attitude of thinking for yourself changes that relationship, right? Okay, what else?
I think 5 years ago, talking about cop block activism and stuff, people just were eager to jump on you and say, you just hate cops. Now it seems every other week there's a story where people that before were hating on me for that are now kind of on the same page with it.
Okay, no, it's a great shift to point out. Still looking for like daily practices.
Where people get their news from.
Absolutely. Be a conscientious consumer of information in every form, especially news. It changes that in a very obvious way. But really, all information, right? And again, because
Personal nullification of unjust laws.
you don't take it as authority, right? Absolutely. But that's sort of like a broad thing. But good point is that that's a way of describing a lot of the stuff we're talking about in terms of the civil disobedience stuff. But what else?
You become a lot more respectful of other people's property. Like you're much more aware of their boundaries and things like that.
Embracing self-ownership, embracing the non-aggression principle means at a fundamental level you kind of relate to people differently. At least if you were a real asshole before you got that idea.
Becoming more self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient in what form?
Growing your own food.
Yes.
Taking care of your own.
Thinking for yourself.
Well, growing your own food. Let's talk about that for a second, because that one's really huge too. And it's kind of nice how it relates to all these other things, right? Well, the FDA said it was okay to eat, so I'm going to eat it. Right? You don't do that anymore. I learned how to do backyard chickens from Nathan Cox here, actually. On that count, though, there's a whole host of things that go along with that. Like, why do you grow your own food?
Because you don't trust, what the government tells you to be, organic or whatever kind of.
Because in a way, you care more when you care about life and freedom, or you care about...
It's a fundamental representation of caring about your own way of, like, being able to survive as a country. You have to be able to survive individually.
You care about your health.
Yeah.
You just want to eat healthy, right? Like, you just don't want to know, like, my food is organic, it comes from my own source, like, right? But what other what else does that motivate then? What other activity does caring about your health and not trusting authority manifest in?
Financial prosperity.
Financial, okay, so that's kind of a different category, but how do people conduct their financial lives differently as a result of this awareness?
So you're more self-aware of your accountability of your inaction. Like when you mess up,
Where you
you
go,
don't immediately jump and look for government help. It's like, I messed up, I need to write this myself.
Are you talking about agorism?
Hold on, I think we need to do a little housekeeping before we go any further on this. If you're a cop, please raise your hand. Okay, well, we never caught anybody like that.
Actually, all of us should. Because we have to be responsible for our own community.
Well, if you are afraid at all, remember you will not be held accountable for anything you say here tonight. We do not take names or check IDs on the way in. So financially, connected with agorism, there's one other big one that people are kind of afraid to say. Although financially, maybe we'll go into one of the manifestations of this is alternative currencies, right? Or alternative savings, if you will, in gold, silver, Bitcoin. I think those are the big three that are in practice. But thinking of all of the ways that you think differently in terms of material value, like real retainable value, when you start thinking along those lines, right? Okay, but why? What are the reasons you would use Bitcoin?
You just don't trust central banking.
Why should there be one
Hold on,
asset?
what do you do with gold and silver? Silver in particular.
You keep
Trade, barter, right? Why would you barter?
Because you actually have something tangible as opposed to a promise.
Are you guys really that afraid? Hold on. So barter, like,
It's tired. It's not that.
circumnavigate to
one of the things about barter, like people assume.
1031 exchange.
All right, well, what all of this is is getting towards, like, and you guys just, now you get it, you're like, everybody's about to get it at the same time. Not paying taxes,
Oh, yeah.
right? When you realize that the government
without
uses
saying.
that was just an assumption, right? It was like, no, we don't even have to talk about that. No, we have to talk about that. Not paying taxes, right? When you realize not only that taxation is theft, but what government does with your money in terms of using it to hurt other people, like you don't feel that obligation anymore. And when we say like avoiding taxes or not paying taxes, that that takes a lot of forms, legal and illegal, right? And they're almost all illegal anyway, which is really kind of sad. The only like legal way to not pay taxes is to be broke and never have any money. I guess you guys understand that one. Because even like with barter, technically any exchange of value over $20 is supposed to be reported to the IRS in your taxes. So like it's legal and it's unenforceable, right? But you're still breaking the law. I mean, this is why there's a book now called 3 Felonies a Day, because that's how many the average American commits. And most of them are, petty financial crimes that are all technically felonies.
Do you think that they plan on one day enforcing those laws more strictly than they are now?
No.
Or is it just some
No.
just
There might be
fill the books with
flips.
laws?
We're going to talk about the future of freedom, which is chapter 10, by the way. We'll get it like where all of these things are going in that sense. So remind me if I don't come back to it. But a lot of these ways aren't really illegal in terms of actual tax evasion. But like, working under the table, working for cash, right? Rearranging your life to minimize your actual legal tax liability. And for some people that's, I'd rather be poor. I'd rather limit myself to what I can do in cash than be working for the man in some form. Like, because I get, not only do I have a lot less risk of ever being audited and like going through that, but I get the satisfaction of living, more in line with my values, right? For some people, this is doing more of their business through an LLC or some other corporate form or a nonprofit like the Freedom Fund. All of those different things, right? So tax evasion, that's a big one. There's one category here that we haven't touched on at all, though. Not even close.
Can I speak to something you just mentioned?
Sure.
I happen to be an accountant and working with a lot of libertarian entrepreneurs. One of the things you might learn is working for yourself, you probably don't have to earn as much money as if you're an employee working for somebody else because you don't get taxed to death as much. You to some extent, you control how much you get taxed, and we're not talking about anything that would resemble tax evasion or anything like that. But you can maintain a very healthy lifestyle working for yourself. That if you're working as a W-2 employee, you'd have to earn much more income
To overcome the
so
inefficiencies.
That ties into
Would you like to make yourself available to anybody here if they want advice on how to rearrange their life? To
The state will get you going through your 1099, dude.
Well, hold on. We have an accountant saying what he's seen in the movement is positive things for people doing, organizing their financial lives. Do you want to make yourself available for people after they can?
Sure, of course.
Okay. What's your name?
James.
James. Everybody, James, the libertarian accountant. We should have more of those. It's not James the libertarian tax collector, okay?
Entrepreneurship in the libertarian community. Most people, a lot of the libertarian community doesn't necessarily want to work the 9-to-5 job. To some extent, we don't necessarily want to answer to anybody.
And that how about
an employer.
So that's actually a really good answer to the bigger question here as well of people living differently. We see a lot of entrepreneurship. And it's not just like, well, I'm going to start the next Fortune 500 company. It's, no, I'm going to conduct my business in a way that's satisfying to me for how I, with my skills, provide value to the market. And then we account for it in our own special ways. Okay, but there's one area we totally missed. We've totally missed.
Personal relationships with other people.
Well, we kind of touched on that, and that's really important. And we're going to come back to that later as well. There's actually like two big areas that we really haven't touched on, and one of them is pretty can be controversial. One of them is the other one that people are afraid to mention in public. But, huh? War?
Yeah,
Well, not enlisting, that's, but that's not what I'm talking about, that's a good one, yes? Oh,
I didn't do it.
She did. So,
She's drugs. Drugs?
drugs, okay, thank you. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. But there's still one other area we haven't touched on at all. Because that's kind of a health one. But because you can grow your own, right?
I feel like I didn't study.
Okay, now that's a good one. We haven't had that yet. Firearms, ownership, and it's not, obviously that's a trend in our movement, right? And you see a lot of people who own firearms for whom that's the gateway issue, right? And because it's so fundamental to like freedom and the use of force, and it demonstrates, in examining the issue, the ridiculousness of government control, from which you can come to a lot of other conclusions. But I would say even more fundamentally than owning guns is taking responsibility for your own protection, right? Whatever form is legal, safe, and appropriate for you. But still one other, I'm kind of surprised.
It's making me feel kind of stupid.
Yeah, just.
Well, maybe it's the nature of this crowd. How many of you are parents? Homeschooling, there you go. Excellent. Well, unschooling, homeschooling, whatever it is, or even just get private schools that don't fit the mainstream educational paradigm, and not trusting the government with your child's mind. There's two other big ones for parents.
No vaccines?
Yes, no vaccines. And I wouldn't even say no vaccines because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not going to pass judgment. But just not saying, well, the doctor and the government said put all these needles in my kid, so I'm just going to do it without question.
At least a question.
Exactly. And at least make a decision for yourself, and for your child in a way that is based on your knowledge and your research rather than authority, because your relationship with authority has changed. There's one other big one that's a lot of fun. Parenting. Peaceful parenting. Actually, yes, that's how I was thinking, but that's a very important one that goes along with it. I should have said there are 4 in this area. Because there's one other big one that's way more fun to talk about. Because my fiance Macy is here. We got engaged a couple weeks ago. See, if you're ever having any trouble public speaking, you need an easy applause line. Hey, I just got engaged. I can't wait until we get to announce it, we get married, and people go, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
But you apply for a license to get married?
No.
No, you're not involving the government.
But we already have the government in the bedroom. No, Mason and I, what's that?
Said I hope they're enjoying it at least.
Yeah, right. Mason and I have been talking about having kids, and so we got to watch this video of a woman giving birth in a creek. She just rolled out a yoga mat and was like, I'm having a baby! It was really cool. And so, home birth, right? And that's like, to a lot of people, that's a big scary one. Unfortunately, I don't think I have to worry about it myself, but for women who are like, well, we're supposed to have our children in a hospital, why, and then you go like, just even with all the legitimate concerns and risks and understanding that, you look at the statistics of healthy children and where they're born, and it's like, well, gee, maybe going to a hospital full of sick people to have a child is a bad idea.
Left them in a nursery to cry.
Right.
We made it 1,000,000 years or so without the hospitals.
Oh,
I imagine there's a way without the hospitals.
Okay, so back to drugs, because that's a really fun topic, right? Marijuana specifically. Maybe you guys are in a room where people don't want to admit. Libertarians smoke more pot than the average American, right? You guys in Virginia well, we can't really admit that around here.
I live in DC, I can.
Yeah, okay. And that's why you live in DC
I'd
now.
say at least
That's
they
the
don't
only
more
reason
safe.
Why would you ever want to
Libertarians speaking if they don't smoke that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. The attitude is totally, and thank you for mentioning that, because we haven't had anybody point that out yet before. And that is an important distinction that really is much broader in the movement. Regardless of your personal drug choices, there's a kind of acceptance. And the one thing that's really forgotten in the debate about drugs in general is that they affect everyone differently. You know, and libertarians seem to have an inherent respect for that. You know, and just being able to look at it rationally. And the conversation about marijuana has really shifted. Let's just take a moment to appreciate where we are historically right now. This is the end of the beginning of the end of the war on drugs. What a beautiful thing to celebrate and say, yeah, thank you, to the government. It's like watching a piece fall off a glacier. You know, it's like a giant chunk of ice, just like, and then there's this crack and this loud noise, and it starts to slide away, and you go like, that's not staying on much longer, is it? And it's about to just dissipate into the ocean of freedom now. And for those of you who have studied the issue and understand just the pervasiveness of the war on drugs.
Population should grow after it ends because of how much blood's been shed over it. I mean, population will go up hundreds of thousands.
Just look, the prison industrial complex, pharmaceuticals. I mean, we know the history with the paper industry, but now, you know, law enforcement, the judicial system, all of the other interests that benefit from marijuana being illegal. But we know why it's really illegal. It's a gateway drug. No, it's a gateway to freedom. Because you can't smoke pot and not realize that the government's totally full of shit. And it is a gateway, like not in and of itself. It's a gateway because like of all the things that are wonderful that government has made illegal, it's the mildest and the most accessible and the most popular. And it really does change your perspective when you go, why is this illegal? And the conversation has shifted in a really beautiful way from what it used to be. You guys remember when California was debating medical marijuana, and that was like such a big deal, a couple decades ago, and it was like, oh yeah, it's for my glaucoma, dude. Am I dating myself with that joke? But back then it was like, you're a Snoop Dogg, no? Right. Glaucoma actually, it's not for the pain or discomfort. Glaucoma creates like a fluid pressure on the cornea. And they didn't know how it worked, but smoking pot reduced the pressure. I mean, you imagine like how painful that is. And to have that cured, to be able to see, to have your eyeballs work versus not working. But the thing about weed is like you turn around every day and there's something else that it cures. It really is a wonder drug. And maybe that's why it's illegal. But now, we know undeniably, scientific proof, all the evidence out there, that for seizure kids, and like I didn't know really that there were so many of them until we started hearing these stories, but there are kids who are born into living hell, where they have seizures all day long. You give them CBD, and it stops it. And there are still, in this country, thousands of state legislators who are actively working to keep that illegal.
Because they're scared of losing their jobs, like so much of the pharmaceutical industry will crumble.
If there is a hell,
that's all it is.
if there is a hell, there is a special place for the people who work to keep medicine away from seizure kids. It is. I mean, I don't see like it just. It's there. It's undeniable. It is inhumane. It is freaking sick that anybody can stand up and say, no, we can't allow a version of this that doesn't get you high to be distributed medically. And it saves kids' lives. I mean, and just all of the anti-cancer properties are insane. But like, hey, if you smoke cigarettes, and this is crazy. People usually like when they do their research. People don't believe this when they first hear it. But they've done longitudinal studies now of people who just smoke cigarettes versus people who smoke pot and cigarettes. And guess what? If you smoke pot and cigarettes versus just cigarettes, you have a lower risk of lung cancer. How about that? They're going to be lacing cigarettes with pot for health reasons. I can't wait for like Marlboro to get on this. They're like, this is our healthy cigarette, kids.
Marlboro Greens. There you go.
But if marijuana is illegal for all of these reasons, what's the stuff that they make really, really illegal? These
The big bad fruit.
psychedelics, thank you. Well, there a couple more in there. All the other hard drugs. And I don't know, talking about like weed is soft because it's squishy, you know, and like meth is a crystal, so it's hard. But MDMA is one that's dear to my heart because of its medical properties and romantic. You're laughing because of its romantic properties as well, right? For people who don't know, MDMA, Molly, was originally developed as a therapy drug for couples in the 80s. And it was very successful. And at some point they said, oh, people are having fun with this. We have to make it illegal. Okay, that's actually not true. They want you to think that that's how it works, right? They want you to think, well, hey, you know, it was getting out of control, people were abusing it. That's not it. What they found out was that, and now we have the specific research to show this, for guys with PTSD, and by the way, I ran a peer support group for vets with PTSD when I lived in D.C. called Homefront Battle Buddies. When I went to the VA, they gave me, when I told them I was having trouble sleeping, 5 prescriptions, 3 of which had suicide listed as a side effect, including Prozac. PTSD, the guys that I was dealing with, you could tell the ones who crawled into bottles would destroy their lives, and the guys who smoked pot were at least able to control their symptoms enough to engage in the kind of talk therapy that is really the only cure for PTSD, other than a lobotomy. And MDMA, 2 sessions, 2 doses with a trained therapist for people who have clinical symptoms of PTSD cures it in almost every case.
That's solo as opposed to as a group?
So yeah, in individual therapy sessions. And 2 hits of MDMA right now on the street or on the Silk Road, whatever version of that is out there, I wouldn't know. 10, 20 bucks a hit. Which means that if it was being manufactured legally, it would cost more to package and deliver those 2 hits than to make them. I mean, the cost would be pennies. Compare that to a lifetime of therapy and Prozac. Makes it really simple to see why something like that has to stay illegal, right? Pharmaceutical industry would rather make patients than make cures, right? But somebody mentioned psychedelics, so we have to talk about that, right? There's something really powerful that you get. For those, if you haven't seen on my YouTube channel, I have a bunch of videos of my first 6 times smoking DMT. I know you're going, how the hell did that happen, right? Well, someone's like, hey man, you got your video camera, right? You want to come smoke some DMT and put it on your YouTube channel? I was like, now? Well, can you give me some time to think of why that would be a bad idea? No? Alright, well then let's do it. So, those are all out there now. And there's something, DMT, mushrooms, and acid in particular, do something to your mind that nothing else does. Now, we've been, this is an interactive event, so while we're on the topic of LSD, I'd like you all to reach under your chairs. You get a tab, you get a tab, you get a tab. Just kidding, we didn't get here early enough. We got over here, but we'll pass them out later. One of the things page 98 in the lower left corner, if you just carry that off.
There's probably a recording device on that.
Oh yeah, of course there is.
So, let's not.
So my advice about all substances is to make safe, informed decisions. Very informed decisions. So one of the things that we didn't talk about in terms of health is exercise. And it's maybe not as obvious a trend in the freedom movement, but libertarians tend in believing about health and fitness goes along with that. One of the things we didn't get as an answer was yoga. Anybody here into yoga? Kind of tough in a male-dominated movement. But hey, for the guys, if you ever have like any apprehension about doing yoga because you're afraid that you're going to be judged for it by other dudes in the movement, 2 words for you, all that goes away. yoga pants. They are so comfortable.
I want you to know, I'm looking at the other one.
But no, seriously, if you haven't done yoga, you owe it to yourself to try it 2 or 3 times. And I said because there's a whole range of experiences that you get from, you know, a really calm, meditative session where you don't even break a sweat. You just do a lot of stretching and, you know, connecting with your body. It's very therapeutic. To a Bikram hot yoga session, which is 90 minutes, which will kick your ass harder than a 90-minute military calisthenics workout. Like, no joke. I mean, I go to the gym and I lift like I was in the Marines, and I'll drink, I bring a gallon of water with me, then I'll drink like a third of it. I'll do a 90-minute hot yoga session, and I will drink an entire gallon of water in 90 minutes. I mean, it really, and if you have to pass a drug test anytime soon, I'm sure it's not bad for that. But you really owe it to yourself to get that range of experiences and see what it does for you. And most people don't know this, but yoga was developed as a warm-up for meditation. And at the end of any good 90-minute session or an hour session, you have 5 to 15 minutes of a line meditation where you just enjoy that experience of being connected with your body, maybe in a state of exhaustion, but being able to turn that attention inward and just enjoy that state of meditation. Yes?
Just a point out, I've heard somebody say before, you know, obviously some people's bodies are probably all jacked up, and some of those things that you're doing yoga are impossible. So I feel like yoga almost just represents being able to be in touch with your body and taking some time to actually, like, whatever, like I play music, and sometimes the energy levels, like through the intensity or whatever it is, to me feel like what has been explained about yoga. Like you just get so much of your energy out in a different way, you kind of get to know yourself, and so there's more than just one way I feel.
Absolutely.
But it's important to spend time with yourself
And
take that time.
And it's important to point out about yoga what you said about, you know, poses being challenging. Are you really going to be intimidated by yoga? But you can always do your own thing. You're always welcome to sit and watch. Like, there's nothing wrong with going to a class that's too hard for yourself and just sort of sitting back and watching people. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But meditation is one of these other trends that sometimes we actually get as an answer when we're talking about health in particular. And for me, it was like I used to run barefoot. That was my, like, to me, that was a form of meditation. And for different people, it's different things, right? But you guys want to feel a little bit more free in about 10 seconds? Do a fun little exercise with me? All right. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and consider for just a moment that everything is right in the universe. And take a deep exhale and slowly open your eyes. Now, if you didn't understand what we just did there, you will by the time I'm done tonight, because the acid will have kicked in by then. There's a feeling that you get when you get in touch with just that idea, because what goes along with that is an incredible sense of self-acceptance as well. If everything is right in the universe, everything is right in me. And there's something about that person being free in a way that someone who doesn't get that isn't. Now, when I was in Fallujah in 2004, I was the guy who always got up early to tell jokes and stories and sing songs and get the guys on my team in a good mood. And as traumatic as that experience was, I enjoyed the challenge. And you've seen people in every field of human endeavors in that Zen state of engagement, right? Where they're engaged in a challenge, in an endeavor, in something that calls upon all their abilities and all their talents and really fires up their passion in a way that, you know, being in that state of ultimate happiness, right? It's not, you know, the more you're accomplishing or the happier you know, the more satisfied you are, the more material wealth you have. But the real height of human existence is that kind of Zen engagement in a higher purpose and a higher calling, right? And in the Marines, you know, maybe it's the sort of whistle past the graveyard mentality, you know, if it ain't raining, we ain't training, you know, that kind of stuff. The machismo. But there is an important psychological underpinning to that. And I found myself in the same state when I was in solitary confinement in D.C. a few years later, when I was there for the shotgun video. And it was something that we don't remind ourselves of enough about the beauty of the human experience. That you have the ability to choose your demeanor at all times. We're going to have our emotional reactions and responses, but what we do with that is always our choice. Every bad day is self-imposed. And maybe this is why I get to call it my government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat in a beautifully manicured, gated community with 24-hour security, full food services. Really beautiful experience. And, every chance I got, and by the way, when you're the guy who can record podcasts over the jail phone, the guards who all wear name tags kind of listen to you, at least try to follow the rules around you. So every chance I got, the guards are coming by, for food or for mail or to flash people with the lights in the middle of the night, whatever it was, I would say, "Excuse me, officer, can I talk to you for a minute? I need to tell you something." Come over to the little window slit in the, my cell door, and I would say, "You're a free, beautiful, independent human being. You should never let anyone tell you otherwise. Have a nice day." Now, those of you who are laughing at that, because you know what the guards are thinking in that moment. Oh, a fun question to ask at these events too. How many of you have been to jail? Overnights count? Really? All right, see, getting arrested doesn't happen that often here.
No, normally it's released on a summons, so it doesn't really go to jail.
All right.
Services.
They like giving tickets here.
Yeah.
So, what were those guards thinking? How is this guy on the inside of the cage happier than I am on the outside? I can tell you, maybe it's because you dress up in a silly costume every day, you work a terrible 9 to 5 as a cog in the machine, and your boss doesn't give a damn about you. Whereas the people that I'm working for, like who wrote me mail when I was in jail, have a lot more love to give and share and are here for a righteous purpose. But there's something even more fundamental to this for us as activists. Now, when we first start paying attention to what's going on, when you go from a state of not paying attention, it has to bring you down in some way. Right? Nobody goes, "Gee, the world's more screwed up than I ever imagined possible. Yay!" So in the course of waking up, how many of you have felt angry at some point? I mean, if you have any sense of justice, right, you have to be angry. Sometimes we get a round of applause when I say that. You go, "Yeah! Let's hear it for the angry people."
They lied to me, damn it.
Yeah. How about when you realize you're more than 50 times likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist, and as much as your neighbor might be a threat to stealing something from you, the IRS is kind of a guarantee that something will be stolen from you? How many of you felt some form of fear in the course of waking up? Too afraid to raise your hands. Okay, I see. But there's a fear, right? Like, and maybe you're afraid of the right things for the first time. Or how about when you start looking at the history of statism, the cost of war and the destructiveness economically and all the opportunities and lives lost and just the cost of statism over the millennia. I mean, how many of you have felt some sort of sadness or depression, right, as a result of that? I mean, you have to, right? If this is motivated by love of serving a higher vision of what the world can be, God, it's freaking sad. But then what do we do with all of this as activists? We grab our signs and our bullhorns and we go out on the street corner and we say, "Now join me in my fear and my anger and my depression." Some of you are going, "Oh shit, I've been that guy, huh?"
It's okay.
It's part of the process, yes. But what's the response when you go out with that attitude? Screw you! I'm going home to watch Dance with the Stars and being a happy little wage slave. Why would I want to be a part of that? Why would I want to? Your truth brings you down. What business do you even have sharing that with other people, right? So, if we're going to share the other thing about that kind of activism is that we get fooled. It really is a movement. We've been sucked into thinking of this as a political movement. And if politics is the conversation of who do we point the guns of government at to organize society, and our premise from the beginning is no, that's not a legitimate way to do things, that's not moral. This isn't a political movement, it's an anti-political movement. You're sick of politics? Good, we got the cure for that. This is a philosophy movement, a morals movement, an ethics movement, a cultural movement, a lifestyle movement. It's a grassroots movement, right? It's not about the top-down solutions even. So there's this temptation, and it's really cool to see like that even we can fill a room like this here, because 5 years ago you might not be able to do this. And when most of you woke up, at some point, even today, if you're waking up today, there's a point of oh, am I the only one? There's some self-consciousness, right, that goes along with that, of being at least different from the mainstream. And so the real danger of this, thinking of it as a political movement, is we get sucked into, I'm going to put on the suit and tie, and I'm going to comb my hair, and I'm going to go out and tell people I'm a good little wage slave, and I work my 9 to 5, and I pay my taxes. And they go, you smell like all the other assholes are totally full of shit. And the people who want to hear this now don't want to hear it from someone who's coming out with all the negativity of politics and the reaction of fear and anger and depression. They want someone who can say, this has made my life better. And the other way that this changes your activism is in your attitude towards authority. If you really are emotionally free, and you can be happy at any time, do you see how that, in a deeper level, changes that relationship to authority? Now, if you don't know how to be happy, what's the point of being free, right? But on a more fundamental level, and by the way, chapter 9, section 4, this is the part that I wrote when I was in jail, happiness causes freedom. We've been tricked into thinking, even from the greatest of libertarian authors of all time, Thomas Jefferson, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as if happiness is something you chase down and beat over the head with a club and drag home to your cave to enjoy forever and ever, as opposed to a choice that you make in every moment. And when you really get that choice, that means that you can have a boot heel literally on your neck and a smile on your face. And you can look up at that guy, and there's no anger anymore. There's no hatred. There's no contempt. If anything, maybe pity, empathy. I mean, you don't really think that the cops who beat up protesters are well-adjusted human beings who go home to happy, loving households every night, do you?
Sure they do.
Or the politicians who seek power to satisfy themselves? You think winning the next election really makes them happy? Or the well, in a sick man way.
But everyone else is status, dude. Like no one else is woken up. So again, they're more than happy. Like they thrive only by into the state.
No. Those people are slaves to seeking power as an external means of satisfying something that's missing that prevents them from choosing happiness in a truer way.
So your theory is just everyone's unhappy.
No, but that
When have you ever seen John McCain really happy?
Happy people who have that self-control and that emotional freedom might be fooled into endorsing the status paradigm and voting for it, but they are not authoritarian people. Someone who has that doesn't actively psychologically seek to control others, doesn't seek to get elected to office in order to control others, doesn't seek ego gratification from the glory of being an elected official. Right? And the same thing is true about money. You think the banksters, and you all know how central the banking racket is to the government racket, or maybe you would describe that as the other way around, right? George Carlin said, trying to make yourself happy is like trying to satisfy your hunger by duct taping sandwiches to your body. These are not happy people. These are the ones who need this more than anybody else, eventually.
Happiness, my personal opinion, a while ago, I decided it's something that can't be obtained. It's not like the pursuit of happiness. I feel is almost like a ploy. Like you're never going to be able to build from the ground up. You just can't be happy in the here and now. Like when the boot's on your neck and you're laying on the ground and there's nothing else you can do, you have to appreciate the fact that you're here in this experience no matter how shitty it is.
Yes. And I don't care if you've got 40 acres, your homestead, a house you built yourself, and a completely independent food system that sustains you and your family, and off-grid power and water. If you stare at your computer screen being angry all day, guess what? You're not free. They win, you lose, end of story. So how do we go forward from an understanding of this in our activism? And how do we then take this as a way to more effectively share the message and win converts? We've got to be honest about this as a movement. We win converts to a different way of thinking. You all know what I mean by that. If you go to people with, hey, I've got this beautiful philosophy that, by the way, could solve most of the world's problems, but more importantly for me, it's allowed me to live more free. It's empowered me to live better. It's made me happier. Would you like to hear about that?
The only way I found to win a convert is to make them curious enough to ask questions.
Well, if you come at it with this
You
attitude,
can't feed it to them. They're not going to eat it off your plate. They're not going to take it from you off the silver spoon. You have to make them curious and go, gee, why is this guy so happy? Give him a piece, so go find the answers to the rest of it.
so if you get sucked into this as a political game, right, you're going to start arguing with people and debating. You want to be like Sisyphus? You want to keep rolling the rock up the hill over and over? Go ahead. Win debates, win arguments, win votes, win signatures, win Facebook flame wars and YouTube comment battles.